Hey guys, in this video we're going to get my 73 Nova ready for Rocky Mountain Race Week. Now this is a running and driving car. I've put a few thousand miles on it. We enjoy driving it at shows and stuff like that, but why would I have to change anything to get it ready for Rocky Mountain Race Week? Well, it's slow. It's real slow. It runs like 1470s in the quarter, and that's not fast enough for me and taking it there. Originally I was going to take Frank and Nova, but I just don't have enough time. I've been too busy with work, which is also why I haven't put out any videos. And now this is the best chance I've got because I know more about this car. Frank and Nova has a mile on it, like literally I've driven, and probably not even that far. So, and everything on it front and back is brand new. So I trust this one more, but it's just not fast enough. We're going to change that. We're going to put a cam in it, we're going to swap the heads on it, and we're going to put a converter in it. Let's get started. Okay, you could do this cam and head swap with the engine in the car. I just personally think that's a terrible idea, so we're pulling the engine out. Now the reason it's a terrible idea is because if you have to pull the front timing cover off to change the cam, well, the front timing cover sets down into the oil pan. The timing cover goes on the engine first, then the oil pan goes off. You can get it off without pulling the pan off, but resealing it and getting it not to leak is probably not going to happen. So instead of having a giant oil leak, I'm going to take the engine out of the car and make sure I've got all that stuff sealed up good and don't have that many issues. Plus, it's kind of a pain to get the camshaft all the way out of the front of the engine. Got to get the radiator stuff out. A lot of times it'll hit this up here. Not a lot of room for that, so it's just better to pull the engine out if you're going to change camshaft, or if you got to pull that front timing cover off for any reason. You really want to pull the engine out of these cars. Now, I really wanted to take Frank and Nova to Rocky Mountain Race Week, and it would be a lot faster than this car, even after I make some changes to this one. But I've just been so busy, I haven't had time to hardly do anything at home, let alone get that car ready. Alright, so I've already drained the fluid out of this thing. I'm going to get the radiator off. And this is not a stock radiator. It's just a generic aftermarket that I made fit. Made my own little brackets for. And then I stuck a stock shroud on it and made that fit. Now I get the lower radiator hose off and hope that I really got all the water out of it. I had taken the lower radiator hose off earlier with a bucket underneath it, so I'm pretty sure that I got it all out right here, but I took it off from the water pump side, not from the radiator side, so we'll see if it dumps a bunch of water on me. It looks like still some water is going to come out of it. Not a bunch. Well, the smart thing to do would have been to put down a pan so I could catch that antifreeze and transmission fluid instead of having a giant puddle of toxic waste to clean up, but it's not happening. As soon as somebody smart starts working on this channel, maybe, but for now, that's how we're going to roll. Alright, now I hope my lower radiator hose will pull out of the way. Maybe it won't. There we go. Now I can get my shroud out of the way. Okay, with that out of the way, now while I'm at the front of the engine and I'm making a mess, I'm going to go ahead and make all the mess that I need to make. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my heater hoses loose, and I'm going to pull my alternator out of the way and my water pump off. That way all of that stuff is out of the way, and once I clean up the water on the floor, I shouldn't have any more water or mess to deal with, other than when I pick the engine up and it tilts a little bit and some runs out below the water pump. Now, since I've got the lower radiator hose off already, I shouldn't really get any water out, not a decent amount anyway, once I take the water pump off, but there'll be a little bit. And then when I hook the engine up and start bringing it out, it's going to dump some water out. But you know, again, that's I'm done playing under the car because I've still got to disconnect the exhaust, the torque converter bolts, and the transmission bolts. So I want to get all the water, that part done, and get it cleaned up, and then I can get in there and start taking all that loose without having to bathe. And the heads on a hose clamp are usually 5/16. So a 5/16 nut driver, a little bit easier to deal with than a flathead screwdriver. Or you can put a 5/16 in your impact or your air ratchet or whatever you're using. Great, it's Chinese. All right, 10 millimeter it is. Another smart idea, if you were smart, because I'm not, is to actually break your bolts on your pulley loose before you take the belt off. So there's some resistance and they'll come loose. I get ahead of myself and forget simple little things like that, but now I get my brackets out of the way so I can get my, that bolt was loose. All right, get my brackets out of the way so I can get my water pump off. Oop, and there's that mess I was talking about. Okay, now like I said, if you weren't changing the converter, if you're going to change the cam and heads, you can do this in the car. I don't suggest it. And one of the reasons, here's a stock small block Chevrolet cam, or just a regular cam, and you can see to get it out, you'd have to be right there, and I'm past this grill support. And yeah, you can take the grill and the grill support out, but then you've also got the issue with getting the timing cover off and then back in without getting the oil pan lip seal wrong, which is really difficult to do. Now, if you've got a two-piece timing cover, hey, this is cake. You just pop that off and then get your heads off and do all that then. It's way easier, but I don't have a two-piece timing cover, and we're changing the converter, so the best way to do it is pull the engine out. Okay, so that's got the front of the engine off. Now, I've still got to take my throttle body loose, my fuel lines and all that stuff. But first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to jump under the car while it's dry under there. I'm going to take loose the collectors at the headers, come up here, pull the spark plug wires, the spark plugs out, go ahead and pop the headers off up here. We'll get this one completely out. And then this one I'll just get loose. It can't come out until the engine's lifted up. But get this side loose that way and come under this side. I can get the starter out. I can get my torque converter bolts loose. And I can get a couple of my transmission bolts loose without too much drama. Right. All right, now that I've already had to get the fuel line loose, I'm going to go ahead and take my throttle body out of the way. Dropping washers everywhere. Okay, so I got the rest of the spark plug wires off. I got the driver's side header out, and the car, I jacked it up enough to get the header out the bottom. Normally you can't get it out through the top. You have to have the car jacked up a pretty good bit to get the header out of the bottom. I got that out. Got the oil drained, got the oil filter off, and now I've got to take the starter off, and I got to take the torque converter bolts out, and then the transmission bolts, and I'm going to yank the distributor out. Now, I've got this tool. One of the reasons I took the spark plugs out, I've got this flywheel turning tool, and this helps while you're under the car. To get your torque converter bolts out, you can grab your flex plate and your ring gear with this tool and turn it while you're under there. And having the spark plugs out makes that real easy because you don't want to be struggling against compression while you're under there trying to turn the engine over. Keeps you from having to come out and turn it over right here, that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm going to get the torque converter bolts out, then I'm going to yank the distributor out. I got to make sure I get everything else out, get my motor mounts loose. Get the transmission bolts out, and then I'm going to set it back down off the jack stands, and we're going to yank the motor out. Okay, so I've got the torque converter bolts out. I've got the lower 4 of the transmission bolts out. I've got my distributor bolt out. I'm fixed to take it loose, and then I can get my top 2 transmission bolts, and we can start pulling the motor out. Okay, all the transmission bolts are out now. I'm going to take my front pulley off real quick, which has got 3 9/16 bolts, and then it's got the 5/8 crank bolt that I got to get out. And the reason I'm taking that off is to give me the most amount of room for the radiator support, because that 2 or 3 inches, when I get this thing coming this way, that'll make all the difference in the world. Get my crank bolt loose, and my pulley's off. All right, my chain is all hooked up. I think all my wires are out of the way. I got to pop my motor mount bolts out real quick. I haven't done that. And then I'm going to throw the hoist in here and jack it up. Now, a lot of people use lift plates, and that's fine. I have one. I loaned it to somebody, and I haven't seen it since. And every time I remember that I need one, it's when I'm pulling an engine out, and so I just throw a chain on it. So maybe I'll remember one day to pick one up. Anyway, the chain will work fine. You know, you got to be careful, because in the right situation, they can slip, and sometimes it makes it really hard because the engine doesn't sit straight, but they work. Now I'm going to get these engine bolts, the motor mount bolts out real quick, and get this thing popped up. Okay, I've got the hoist hooked up. I've got a little bit of pressure on the motor. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around there and throw a jack under the transmission. So I want to get the motor up where I can get the motor off the engine mounts off the frame mounts. But I want to get the transmission up high enough to where when I do that, I can just pull the motor forward without having the transmission fall down or in a bind or anything like that. All right, I got a little bit of pressure on the transmission, not much at all. And it's going to come off the transmission when I pick this up more. And as soon as the transmission hits the top of the tunnel, sorry, can't see. As soon as the transmission hits the top of the tunnel here, there's no need to go any farther, because it's not going up any farther. And you're just going to tear stuff up. And as you come up with the jack, it'll start separating the engine and transmission. Alright, it's hard when you're doing this stuff by yourself, but you know, whatever. It's just me. So, see, there's no tension there, so I think my engine was slipping down a little bit. Let's see here. There we go. That was it. See if I can come forward a little bit. Get farther away from the transmission. And this is when a lift plate comes in handy. When you know you can pick it up square, because that chain is causing it to twist. Alright, that should be far enough up. I can get it out more of the car. There we go. Now I can get it set down kind of low, and then I'm going to lose a bunch of water that's probably still in the block. I'll put something under the front of the engine to hold it up. Alright, I got all my intake bolts. I got this thing on the stand, by the way. Got it out, got it on the stand. Got the flex plate off. Got all my intake bolts out. I'm going to pop the intake off real quick. Well, I got to take a valve cover off. But I'll pop a valve cover off real quick. Then I'm going to take the intake off. And intake doesn't like to come off unless at least one valve cover is off. Right. It's nice and clean in there. nice and clean. All right, so I'm gonna see if I can get this intake to pop off without too much drama. There we go. All right, looks nice and clean in there. Everything looks good. If this was a roller cam block, I'd be putting a factory roller cam in it, but it's not, so that's where we're at. Zip all my little small oil pan bolts out, then I'm going to get the big oil pan bolts because there's two different sizes. All four corners have a 1/2 inch head bolt and everything else is a 3/8. All right, I got that side down just a hair. There we go. There we go. All right, now we get the timing cover off. And I'll be done for the night and get back to it tomorrow. Okay, so yesterday I got the engine out of the car, I got the intake off, got the oil pan off, got the timing cover off. Now what we're going to do is we're going to swap the cam, swap the heads, put new rocker arms, all that stuff on there, get everything sealed back up. Then we're going to stick a new converter in the transmission, put the engine back in there, and hopefully get this thing fired up today.